So, oh, here we are. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to the AP Lit review session today. We're excited to be sharing another week with y'all. And this is just going to be, we've taken a shift now in our instruction, and each lesson this week is just going to be writing focused. It's going to be very targeted lesson. We're going to be talking about dissecting prompts, writing a thesis statement, how do we organize our essay, how do we embed quotes. So short, targeted, specific, writing specific lessons. I'm Susan Barber from Atlanta, Georgia. Shout out to Grady High School, the Grady Knights. I'm missing y'all. My co-teacher, he's with us today, Bear Barber. It's funny, I got a letter, an email from someone who said that Bear reminds them of his students sleeping in class and not paying attention and not motivated this time of year. But we know y'all are the motivated ones because you're with us. 18 days, 18 school days until the AP Lit exam where you're counting it down. Mr. Escobar, glad you're with us again today. Tell me something good that happened this weekend.
How are you guys? Mr. Escobar from Miami, Florida, representing Felix Varela Senior High School. Something good that happened this weekend is I was feeling a little under the weather, and I fought it, and I think I'm on the other side of a small cold. Um, if I'm whispering or screaming, you got to let me know, Miss Barber, because my ears are a little clogged, I think. But I'm grateful to be healthy, and I'm grateful to be here with you today and with all of our listeners. And I want to bring something up. I received an email, and I fell a little behind with emails this week, and so I'm sorry if I haven't replied to you, just because again I wasn't feeling 100%. But I was struck by a student who mentioned that she has never been good in her English classes, right? And I started thinking about that verb, that form of the verb to be. And if you're a student out there who is feeling that way, I've never been good, or I am not good, and let's change the way we think about this. Maybe you have struggled, but let's not use the to be verb. Let's not say that you are not good. You've struggled, and with practice you'll get better. But I think we have to get into that zone now, right? You said 18 days before the exam. We have to believe that we can do it. We have to believe that even though perhaps you have struggled, you haven't understood the passages, your essays have been maybe a little too short, or your essays have been just off the mark. All that means is that you have to stick around, and you have to listen to our advice, and you have to go through these lessons, and you have to try to connect to your teachers, with your teachers, as much as possible, so that as you practice more and more, you struggle less and less, and then you are great at English. So let's not be defining ourselves by our weakest moments, but let's just do what we got to do to get ready for this exam, and that's what it's all about, right, Miss Barber?
That's right, because the reality is if you're showing up and doing this kind of work, you're a good student. I mean,
Absolutely.
absolutely,
Yeah.
100% you are. Also, I want to say hi to Miss Nestor's class in Danville, Virginia, who's with us today. I know they're watching. So Miss Nestor's a good friend of mine, so y'all are in good hands. Friday, we left and we said we wanted you to think about exam day and what's going to be your plan for exam day. Are you going to be printing and annotating on a hard copy of the prompt, or maybe printing is not an option? It really wouldn't be an option for me at my house, and I would be taking notes on hand by hand. And if I'm doing that, what is going to be my plan for taking notes? And we shared a document that you can tweak and make your own for taking notes. But that was the homework, to think through exam day, and what is going to be your plan, because the more prepared you are for knowing your plan for the exam day, then the more you're going to be able to just focus on the task at hand. We want to just help you think through as much as you can before then, so there aren't any surprises that day. The only surprise is going to be the text in front of you. Everything else will be thought through. So here are the basic things that you need, that you should have thought through, and maybe you're still thinking through it, and we encourage you to talk to your teacher about this. Taking a cue from Hamlet: to print or not to print. I mean, that's something you're going to have to decide. To print and annotate or to take notes. That's another thing you're going to have to decide. To handwrite or to type. All of these are decisions that you need to think through now, and you need to practice now. Some other things, and we'll be sharing strategies all through the remainder of the lessons, but some other things you need to be thinking about.
Can I say one thing, Ms. Barber?
Yeah,
Because
of
I can
course.
picture the emails now, right? All these students asking us what our opinions are about these things. And the truth of the matter is that I don't think there is a single right answer. I think that what you have to do right now, as students, is practice all of these different combinations and permutations and see which one works best for you. Are you more comfortable reading off the screen and taking notes, or printing and annotating on the paper? Are you more comfortable writing by hand, taking a picture and sending it to your teacher? Or are you more comfortable with just typing it, let's say on the My AP Classroom interface, and then submitting it that way? So it's not that I don't want you to ask us those questions, but those questions are not ones that we can readily answer for you. I think it's really a matter of practicing and seeing what fits, what works best for you.
Exactly. And my students did a timed writing last week, and I told them, I want you to think through what you want to do on exam day and practice it. And so many of my students, because we handwrite in my class all the time, so many of my students were really excited about typing. And after they typed and submitted that way, I had several who did not like it, and they're going to handwrite, and they wouldn't have known that if they had not have practiced ahead of time. Some of them like the typing better. So just go ahead and think through exam day, and then practice a couple of times and see if it's really playing out like you're picturing it's going to play out. So some other decisions you'll need to, or other things you need to think about: go ahead and tell your family when the exam is and what time you're going to be taking it, and you'll need to think through, like, what space in the house am I going to work in? Will I have a quiet space then? You may have younger siblings at home. Your parents are maybe working at home. So all of that, you'll need to think through exactly where you're going to take the exam. A lot of you are probably working that day, and you need to go ahead and tell your boss, and you need to for sure have a device. If you're sharing a computer with siblings or parents, you'll need to think through that and make sure your devices are charged. So again, these are reminders and things will help you think through for exam day, but hopefully you thought through a little bit about how you're going to handle the prompt on that day. So today we're going to shift, and we're going to be talking about unpacking the prompt. And really our goal is to write a good thesis statement that makes a defensible claim about an interpretation of literature and hopefully establishes a line of reasoning. But we cannot write an effective thesis statement if we don't take time to really unpack the prompt and think through the prompt. So today's lesson is going to be, how do I unpack a prompt, and what are the different parts of a prompt, and how can I use all of those parts of the prompt to really guide my reading and guide my writing.
Absolutely. So what's in a prompt, right? What can I expect to find in a prompt that I will then wrestle with and use it for my interpretation of literature? Every single prompt will have the author, the date, and the title. It's going to give you some context for what's happening in the passage. And then it's going to give you the task, the main goal, the main um, uh, thing that you're going to have to answer in your thesis and then defend in your essay. Sometimes the prompt is a little more complex, so there may be multiple tasks, but we're going to look at ones today that will just have one specific focused task. But I'll give you examples of others as well. So now the College Board has said that from now on, all questions will have these stable prompt wordings. So it's not going to be a surprise as to what the prompt will look like or sound like. And this is the template, if you will, for what the prompt will look like. The following excerpt is from, and then they're going to give you, and I color coded with the image at the top. They're going to give you the author, the date, and the title. Then they're going to go into the passage and the context for that passage. So in this passage, and then they're going to tell you something about what's going on. Then they're going to remind you to read the passage carefully. And then they're going to give you your task in a well-written essay, do X, right? Analyze how the author uses literary elements and techniques to do something very specific. And you see some verbs there: to convey, to portray, to develop, and different things that they may ask you to convey, portray, or develop. Thematic, topical, or structural aspect of the passage that is complex and specific to the passage provided. So I want you to see how our little image in the top right matches the different aspects or the different pieces of the stable prompt wording that has been provided. Now, your teachers may be giving you some of the old prompts, right? Because that's what, honestly, that's what we have access to. This is the first year where that stable prompt wording will be used. But it's very easy to convert an old prompt to a new prompt. So let me walk you through that just for a second, because again, today's focus is how do we work with the prompt? And I want you to be working with a prompt that looks like what we're going to get on the day of the examination. So here we have the old prompt. Carefully read the following excerpt from William Dean Howell's novel, The Rise of Silas Lapham. Then, in a well-constructed essay, analyze how the author portrays the complex experience of two sisters, Penelope and Irene, within their family and society. You may wish to consider such literary elements as style, tone, and selection of detail. And you might recognize this last sentence as something that used to appear often on the test, which was
Mhm.
a laundry list of devices, and that's gone, right? Because when we look at the stable prompt wording, now we have this phrase here. Um, Literary elements and techniques. So how the author uses literary elements and techniques, that's going to be the catch-all phrase, and it's up to you to decide which of these techniques and devices you're going to argue are working to convey some aspect of, of the task. So if this is the stable prompt and that's the old prompt, how can we make it look like the new one? And all I did was try to fit in the different pieces into that new prompt. The following excerpt is from William Dean Howell's 1885 novel, The Rise of Silas Lapham. In this passage, you will read about the experiences of two sisters, Penelope and Irene. Read the passage carefully. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how Howells uses literary elements and techniques to portray the complex experience of the two sisters within their family and society. So when we take that prompt, we're able to then highlight it so that it matches all the different things that we have listed in our diagram. Ms. Barber, was that clear, you think, to the students of what we went through right there?
Yeah, so exactly. And what a weird year, like so many changes with AP Lit and
Yeah.
the rubric and the wording of the prompt, and then to have a pandemic as well. It's just a lot of things at once. But that's exactly right. And that's why when we developed this literary 3x3, before you would see, and probably in many of the prompts that you practiced with in the past, you're going to see some of the literary elements or devices listed. And now you will just see this more generic phrasing, the literary elements and techniques, without having a listing of specific ones. But in our note-taking guide, we did include some of the most common ones in case you get stuck or just need a reminder. It's there in front of you.
So what do we do with these parts, right? A lot of times I see students just breeze through the prompt because they want to get to the passage and they want to start writing their essays. Well, there's a few things that we need to think about. So we take this first element, the author, date, and title, and we ask ourselves a series of questions. Does the title provide insight into the work? Well, what do I mean by that? Let's take Kate Chopin's The Awakening, right? That's preparing us, I think, for the reading experience. We're going to witness an awakening. That says something. Whereas, let's say the character of, the title Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, maybe prepares us less for the experience of reading. Although now we know that Hamlet is the main character, and if you're the main character in a Shakespearean play, you're gonna die, right? So maybe that is preparing us somewhat. Who is the author? That might tell us something. That might, is the author from Latin America? Is the author Russian? Is the author from uh, Nigeria? Is the country of origin of the author, the time period, matching the date here will tell us something. Was it written during a time of war, right after a time of war? All that little those little bits of information, I think, should inform our reading, or at least the way we approach the prompt and the passage. What was happening in the author's environment when it was written? Again, we go to the country of origin or the surrounding, right? Is the writer writing from a large country, a small town? Whatever information we get, we're going to use that to filter the passage through. Then the context. This is important. Remember, we spoke a few videos ago about in media res, how we sometimes get a story narrative that starts in the middle of the action. Well, more likely than not, that's what's going to happen the day of the exam. Because if we get an excerpt from a novel, as opposed to like a complete short story, we are going to enter in the middle of the action unless they give us the first chapter. But sometimes that starts in media res as well, and we won't understand what came before, and we won't know what comes after the fact. So this information in the prompt will help us understand the plot. This is basic comprehension, which we're going to use to our advantage, to help us interpret and analyze and reach deeper levels of understanding. But at the very primary level, it's going to help us comprehend what we're reading. It helps us understand the plot, recognize characters' perspectives, and we already had a lesson on characters' perspectives. And we're going to determine characters' relationships. Is this like Rosamund and Lydgate, right? Is it a married couple? Are we talking about friends? Are we talking about siblings? Who are the characters and how are they related to one another? Because that might give us maybe a hierarchy or a power play between the characters. All that information is really, really useful as we ultimately develop our thesis statement. And then the task. What should be the focus of my interpretation? What must I answer in my thesis? I can't stress this enough. The thesis statement should not just rephrase or summarize the task. It should answer the task. And if there is a second task, well, that must be answered as well within the thesis. So what do we do with these? We are going to go back to this prompt that we had looked at already, and we've already reworked it so that it looks like a stable prompt. And we're going to ask ourselves these questions. So, the rise of Silas Lapham. What does the title tell us? Well, the rise of. I've never read this work. I haven't read the passage yet because right now I'm only looking at the prompt. The rise of, is this sort of like, does this person become powerful? Is this person growing up? Is this person being born? I don't know. It's 1885, so I got to get ready. Probably the syntax will be tough. Um, do I know what country? I don't know. Is it America? Is it England? Are we somewhere else? It's the 19th century though, so I got to pay attention to maybe uh,
It's
male,
going to be
female
different than our
perspective.
time period and
Absolutely, at
our
the very least,
modern
right?
way of thinking,
Yeah.
correct?
It's the experience of two sisters, Penelope and Irene. So I go to context. So I know these women are sisters. and it's
Mhm.
about their experiences. So, I have a brother, I have kids, I know how sibling relationships function sometimes. So I got to be on the lookout for that. Are they fighting? Are they loving? Are they supportive of each other? This is important. What should the focus of my interpretation be? What must I answer? Analyze how Howells uses literary elements and techniques to portray the complex experience of the two sisters within their family and society. These sisters are going to experience something within their family, which will be manifested onto society as a whole, and it's going to be complex.
Mhm.
So I got to see how this experience is portrayed, how it's described, how they react to it, how it impacts them and their family and society as a whole. I must answer that. I cannot just say that they have an experience. I must say something about the experience and how it's complex and how they respond to it. I'm ready to write my thesis now after I read the passage because I've asked all these questions, right?
And just looking at this really gives you focus and direction for your reading as well. You go into this text just knowing so much about it before you have even read one word of it.
Yeah. Yeah. All that pre thinking is so critical, right? So, for check for understanding today, I want us to go through this again, and we're going to go through it with a different prompt. And Miss Barber and I are going to play teacher student today. The prompt is. You want to read it, Miss Barber?
Sure. The following excerpt is from the novel Lucy by Caribbean American author Jamaica Kincaid, published in 1990. In this passage, the narrator describes the beginning of a new phase in her life. Read the passage carefully. Then, in a well written essay, analyze how Kincaid uses literary elements and techniques to portray the complexity of the narrator's new situation.
Okay. So here we go. What when you look at the author, the date, and the title, how does that provide any insight to you, Miss Barber? What do you now know? What is important here?
So I know the author is Caribbean American, so that's already going to just let me be thinking about this being a multicultural work. Um, and that makes it multi-dimensional right there. And it's also published in 1990, so it's going to be modern. So I really don't have to be thinking about like as far as like different time period elements, like it's going to be a modern setting, so
Mhm.
kind of some that's an advantage to me probably as a reader, but still, the multicultural aspect I think makes it that's where some of the complexity comes in, I think. And
Does the
also
title
just
tell you
yeah,
anything?
so just the title is is the character's name, Lucy, I assume. So I think this is going to be very character driven. It's going to be very focused on this one particular character, and this character's something about her journey in life.
Okay, good. Let's look at the context. What does the context help you understand before you enter the passage?
So the narrator describes the beginning of a new phase in her life. So something, and we don't know all of the details, but probably this excerpt that I'm going to be looking at is going to the narrator is taken some new outlook or new approach in life, has had some shift already. I mean, we know to look for shifts, so I'm probably going to be able to figure out in reading like what she shifted from and what she's shifting to.
And what exactly is your task? What must you answer in your thesis here? And are there multiple tasks or do you see one main one?
Let's see. In a well-written essay, analyze how Kincaid uses literary elements and techniques to portray the complexity of the narrator's new situation. So we know something about a new phase in her life, and there's going to be some complexity or some different layers, some different, it's going to be complicated, her new situation. It's not an easy path forward. So I'll be unpacking how her new situation or this new shift in her life is complicated.
So basically one task right here.
One task, it looks like.
Yeah. Probably not
But
an
it's a
easy task, but
but
it's
it's a
what, yeah,
complex, yes, it's a
absolutely,
complex
absolutely.
task. Yeah.
Yes. So, for the students out there, this is exactly what we want you to do. We want you to not breeze through the prompt. We want you to think about it and understand that there are at least three, and perhaps more if there are multiple tasks, but there's at least three main categories of let's say, uh, roadblocks that you have to stop and think about certain things.
Mhm.
The author, the date, and the title must inform you about the passage. The context should guide you so you're able to understand the plot, and the task will focus your reading, focus your annotations, and ultimately focus your thesis, because that's what you have to answer. So we don't write a thesis statement after we read a passage. We write a thesis statement after we understand the prompt. The exam, and I know I've said this in the past, and I'm going to repeat it because I can. You're not, your job is not to write an essay. Your job is to write an essay in response to a
Mhm.
specific prompt. Don't forget that. Okay. So you understand the prompt, then you're going to be much more successful when you write your essay because you're going to address it specifically. Ultimately, the goal is to develop a thesis, though, right?
Mhm. And that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. But again, you really, until we understand exactly what the prompt is asking, it's going to be hard. You just can't separate these two things. The dissecting of the prompt and the writing of the thesis, they go hand in hand. So tomorrow we're going to be looking at a prompt and then figuring out how we unpack that. And now what do we do with all of that information that we've unpacked? And how do we write our thesis statement based
So
off
these
that?
questions will make a lot more sense tomorrow once we're writing the thesis statement. But
Correct.
for homework, we're not writing the thesis statement yet. For homework, we're going to use this prompt, and this is one that you read, correct, at the reading.
I read for this a couple of years ago, and my students wrote on this last week. This was a timed writing that they did.
So we went ahead to help you guys. We already color coded, so we already showed you where the author, date, title will be, where the context is given, and where the task. And there's only one task really here, where the task is located within the prompt. Your job is going to be to do all the thinking that's involved. Okay, you're going to take the prompt. You're going to ask yourselves those questions in red. You're going to populate the boxes on the right about the topics that are on the far left. Do you think we should read the prompt for them, Miss
Sure.
Barbara?
You want to?
Go
You
ahead,
want
it's
me to?
yours. You've read
Okay.
it probably a million times, haven't
It
you?
seems like it. The following excerpt is from an 1852 novel by Nathaniel Hawthorne. In this passage, two characters who have been living on the Blythedale farm, a community designed to promote an ideal of equality achieved through communal rural living, are about to part ways. Read the passage carefully. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how Hawthorne uses literary elements and techniques to portray the narrator's complex attitude towards Zenobia. And we've already put this in the stable wording, so it's exactly the type of prompt you'll see on the exam this year.
And just as a reminder, you're not writing the essay. In fact, you're not even writing the thesis statement tonight. All
Wow,
you're
we're letting them
doing,
off easy, right?
that's, well,
No, but we want you to think through. Let's
that's right.
train our minds to think through the prompt. Every stage of this is so critical, and this is your first task, reading and unpacking the prompt. It's crucial for the rest of the work you'll be doing.
That's right. So do all the thinking that's necessary, and then you'll be successful.
So that's it, right? If, again, I think the deadline is coming up for letting College Board know. If you know of someone who doesn't have access, they are working hard to make sure people have what they need to take the exam. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about writing thesis statements. Looking forward to that, another very practical lesson. Thanks for joining us today. Happy Monday, everybody.
Bye, guys.